I want to get to know you as how you present to the world a little bit, like we've never met. And I want to thank you for coming on here. You really thought very carefully if you wanted to present yourself on this platform. And I commend you for that. I think that's an amazing expression of commitment to yourself. And so thanks and kudos. I see you as this shapeshifter, like you wear many hats. You're very creative in a lot of ways. You're entrepreneurial, you're an activist, you're what I would consider an erotic artist, which carries lots of different variations to it. We can talk about that. And yeah, I want to know more. How do you define yourself right now? Like how's that going for you? I know you say you're a mistress of ceremonies, and what does it mean for you?
So the mistress of ceremonies actually kind of started as a joke of sorts, because I had a t-shirt, still do have a t-shirt company called Brown Girl Party, and I wanted something that was like playful and interesting and kind of all-encompassing for all of the hats that I was wearing for that. And I figured mistress of ceremonies, because it's not like we're just a t-shirt company, like we did events, that range from nightlife to just like craft fairs and different community things. So I was like, yeah, like whatever the ceremony is, like I'll be kicking it off and, just kind of heading that. So it's just kind of like a funny little title and I just ran with it. But as far as like occupationally goes, I guess I identify as a sex worker. And so for me, that has, been the types of sex work that I perform are adult film and stripping. And so it's been really interesting to kind of embrace that terminology too, because a lot of people still reserve it to mean, full service workers. And I mean, I don't think that we're taking up any space from full service workers by any means, but, it really is just the unity behind it and the umbrella terminology that I think we're trying to give ourselves, more language for the public to use and not incorrectly label us. And on top of that, like I also am a model, and I don't like to kind of categorize like the type of modeling that I do because I do everything. Yeah. And so yeah, it's kind of been interesting where people will say, oh, you're an alternative model, you're a tattoo model, you're like, a fine art model or a figure model. And I'm like, yes, but by definition, because I pose, doesn't really matter whether or not I'm wearing clothing or not, like the function of the job is posing. So I just consider myself a model all across the board. And yeah, so that's been kind of an interesting, I guess, like trajectory, because I started out as a model and then I kind of crossed over into doing more video work, and then that further crossed over into adult film.
Okay, well then you segued for me. First of all, you are a chameleon. Like I mean, I only have your Instagram page to go by, but you do cross so many different genres, let's say. I don't like having to pin down, what kind of an artist I am either, or an expressionist. I often call myself an atmosphere enhancer. That to me is like enough. But so this was, it's a good segue to the next question that I had, because first of all, adult film, I'm just getting into doing that right now. I've done it on my own, but I've never done it. It's because of COVID, which is why I went more online, like a lot of women or a lot of workers in general. And it's, I had to like cross this like threshold. You have to be really prepared for putting that out into the world. And so I'm curious, like, what was that process for you? Were there things that you did to help you transition into that world, or like what's that relationship like for you?
Uh, to a degree, I guess, because I'd been towing the line for some time, because I already had a platform that I was using called Findro at the time, which was subscription based, very similar to like OnlyFans, Just for Fans, Patreon, that sort of thing, where people pay a monthly, amount, and they are in turn getting whatever content I'm uploading.
Right.
And it had taken a while for this particular platform to kind of like update the types of content we could do. So for a while it was only photos and GIFs, and then video kind of came along later, and there isn't really like a messaging platform, which I know a lot of the newer platforms tend to have. So it's been really interesting to see the evolution of that. But I started making like, shorter, just like stripteasy films, which were kind of allowing people to see how I operated in like a club format, for them who've never seen that before.
Yeah.
And that kind of entered into, okay, well, like I might do something that's a little more racy in the next one. And then it just kind of like started, I wouldn't say snowball, because that just like feels like it got out of control, but it quickly evolved into, well, this is not necessarily the most interesting or engaging for me, and I don't know how much it's interesting and engaging to the viewer. So like, let me actually do a little bit of research and see what people are interested in and looking for when it comes to this type of platform. And I'm sure there are people who would be completely fine to only have me, putting out really high quality photos and things like that. But it just doesn't seem like that would have served me, because I'm like, that's kind of what the functions of magazines or like an Instagram page is for. So I don't know, I'm like, I wanted my work to be showcased as it's meant to be, which is uncensored. And so I guess I kind of just started talking to friends who had already been in the adult film industry as independent film creators, and talking about like what sells for them, what they like to shoot, picking up tips and tricks along the way, and starting to really do that networking just over the last year. So I'm still pretty new to adult film also.
Hey.
So yeah, it's only technically been a year that I've been shooting, pretty hardcore content. And that also came about because I had a partner who was comfortable being filmed at the same time. So it just kind of like all the stars aligned, if you will, for me to be able to make that crossover, because it was just like the point in my life where I felt comfortable to do it. And I don't know, like I had all the equipment too, so that was really helpful.
Yeah.
Because that's usually everyone's first barrier. It's like, well, I don't have a camera, I don't have lighting, I don't have, a
Editing
decent
software and
a decent computer to even begin to edit on. Yeah. So all of those things, I'm like, I already can do this. I'm just lazy and haven't tried to really get into it.
What do you have to like work up? Okay. So for me, cause I don't know if you still have a partner. You said you had a partner, but I have a partner that, helps me anyway. Sometimes he's involved and sometimes not. And sometimes I'm like, setting up the tripod and figuring it out for myself. And then sometimes it's very intimate, and, but like, that's very separate from our relationship, and it needs to be, scheduled in, and, that moment has to kind of come out in this spontaneous yet structured way. And there's, we've got a shot list, and, like, how are we moving forward? Is that like, what's your experience? I think like for me, that's the hardest part of getting started, is like, I don't want to blur too much of the lines between our actual relationship and a presentation, the creative presentation of the art form itself.
Yeah.
But like for you?
More or less the same. So I am still with that same partner. I didn't mean to make it sound like he had been chopped out of the picture, but no, he's still here. We actually just moved in together, and so it makes creating that much easier. Yeah. But you're right, it is very much like a structured, scheduled part of our relationship that is like a performative aspect of it. Because we're not doing anything in the scenes that we create that is not genuine to our own like intimate chemistry or anything like that, but it is still thinking about like the end goal of creating a product at the end of the day. And so that is like, all right, we might have to be at an angle in a position or something to like make it the most visually interesting, which, you know, can always add an extra layer of this is awkward, and we would probably not be doing this if we were genuinely just having regular sex.
Yeah.
So
type of lens you use too, you know, like if it's you know, a 50 millimeter and you're like, oh, this is a portrait lens, and so everything is like, you know, super close up, it's can make for some like good laughs.
Oh yeah, the outtakes are hysterical, and like sometimes I put them on Twitter because I'm like, this is just funny, like but most of the time I'm like, oh no, these are just for us. So
what's it, okay, so let's just go with this relationship thing. How so you've been in a relationship for a couple of years, I'm assuming, yeah, and you're living together now. It's always I always find when people hear that I'm in a relationship, or, you know, when I was just started dating someone, it was always kind of like this emotional process of like either revealing that this is the work that I do, or like sticking to the work that I do despite feelings. But I have so much support in this relationship. We have our own boundaries that by my own choice have limited the types of services that I provide anymore. Like I don't do full service like I used to. But for me to be fully seen by my partner and not to have shame about what I'm doing, or to feel like that awkwardness, or, you know, to keeping things super separate, it has been such a liberating experience for me. And I wonder, like, what's your experience in that? And maybe to add to it, have you had to defend having a relationship to people?
So I guess I'll answer the last part of that first. Just I haven't had to defend my relationship to people in my own life or even clients or anything like that, because at least for my like social media, like I'm very transparent. I've always been like very open when I become serious with partners, because they'll start to pop up in my posts a lot. And so it's like, well, clearly you're hanging out with this person a lot more, so you must be dating them, or, you know, whatever the case is. And so I haven't really had too many people feel that much of like an investment, or like I don't know, like a entitlement to my time or my energy in that way, where they feel like they can say whether or not they feel like I should be dating someone. Like I don't know. So I've never had that particular type of experience, and I definitely would just shut it down, because I'm like, you have no right to tell me or to express to me a person that you have never met, you know, who should be in my life intimately. That's just like excruciatingly inappropriate. But
it happens.
Yeah. Oh no, I know. I absolutely. And it is, when I hear friends talk about it, I'm just like, wow, like my head would explode. Like, I don't know how I would tell that person to like gently fuck off. Like, I don't know. Cause that's really the only response at the end of the day. It's like, to take up any more bandwidth and try to explain to this person why they shouldn't be. It's very kind, and like people do that work, but I'm not one of them. So I
think like,
even,
sorry, just to say, like, I've had say, well, you know, I've had men say, I wouldn't allow my girlfriend, like it as though it lessens who they are. But what I see is it's such a sign of strength and self, you know, and confidence, that I find it like super attractive. It's more attractive than anything. It actually turns me on more to know that, you know.
right.
to see that. Okay, so sorry, but I didn't mean to cut in, but had to
No,
say.
and I have had, you know, in the past, like people make comments or something like that. But I guess because of the type of work that I do and because it has been so visual and taken place so much on social media,
Yeah.
people feel like they're already connected to me. And so it is just another voyeuristic element of, I'm glad that you're happy, and like it makes me happy to see that you're happy,
Yeah.
not so much as they view themselves as virtual boyfriends. And then also the idea that it's kind of like this weird, like jealousy in like almost I can't even say like a playful manner because I don't really think it is, but just the idea that they're like, they value me and see me as kind of being a prize. And so they're like, wow, that guy must be awesome because he dates you. And that also feels very like objectifying in a very weird way that I'm like constantly trying to like squash, because I'm like, I'm still a person, he's still a person, we both have agency, and I just do this job. Like, and this is not like this very like structured and particular version of me that you guys see through my work is not who I am 24/7. So I'm like, you think that you want to date me, but you really just want to date my persona online. It's very different. I actually had like a video on my YouTube about like that very question coming in from like a Tumblr user saying like, I would love to date a girl like you or something like that. And I kind of was just like, you guys need to get out of this mindset that, you know, sex workers in general are people who are like, you know, these, this is still very gendered, but like these princesses that have to be won or rescued or like whatever the case is. And that we are like these, the epitome of like, you know, the perfect girlfriend. Because it's like, just because you see this sexual being in their element, you know, doing whatever sexual, I guess like services they're, you know, advertising they provide, it's like, it again is like smoke and mirrors. This is fantasy. This is not like, this is not who we are. This is not how the sausage is made. You know, you kind of, I always think that it's so strange that like they can't turn that off. So it's like, it's not even like a toggling. It's like they truly believe that this is like the persona that we always are. It's like, to a degree, yes, but this is still like something that's very structured and like made to be this way and present this way. So going back to the first part of your question, sorry, that was, first part of your question was about like how I got into my relationship, or do I feel empowered to be in a relationship?
Sure, whatever.
I'm like, I just want to make sure I'm answering the right thing.
But I, you know, I'm just curious because people are always like the behind the curtain to be in a relationship, like what that looks like with this added complication. You know, it does add this layer or filter, not filter. It's another facet, but it's very, for me, it's deeply woven into like how as that I identify as a sex worker is woven into my DNA. Like I can't escape the call of the siren. It's been in me since it came to me through my mother. Like she has it. So like
Nice.
So to be in a relationship with someone where that's like almost a third party, you know, I think people are very curious to see how that looks. And so, and it's different for everybody.
Yes. So for me and Reed, I met him actually through work. So it's known that Reed has a foot fetish, and some of the things that we've shot have been foot fetish porn. And yeah, and so we actually met at like a foot fetish like party. And so it was very much like, from the onset of our relationship, he knew that I was a sex worker and the type of works that I did, and I've always just been very transparent about it. And I think that like if we hadn't met under those circumstances, it would have been the same relationship just because of the nature of person that he is and his respect for sex workers and, I mean, women in general. But I have known other partners have like very conservative and conflicting viewpoints on it, where it's like, again, they either want to control the type of work that you do, or, you know, how frequently you do it, or the types of clients you see, or like whatever the case is, so that they feel like it never becomes more than the work that it is. And I don't know, that's just never worked for me in the past. Like I too have had the call of the siren since I was very young. Like I started out as a stripper at 19, 20 years old. And so it's been, you know, the most consistent job that I've had as an adult is being a sex worker. And I feel very like empowered by that, because it's like I have legitimately like carved out my own life through sex work and, you know, being independent and like having that as my backing. So as hard and as strange and like wonderful as it's been, you know, it too is like very much invested in my DNA. Like, and I can't even imagine what my life would look like without sex work being in it. Because I also started sex work when I was in college. Like that was, they went hand in hand. It was like, I don't, you know, have the luxury of having parents who are filthy rich and can take care of me and give me all these things. Yeah. So yeah, it just has been a very interesting road, and I have tried to make sure that I've filled my life with people who are either also in the sex industry in some capacity or just very sex work friendly, because I'm like, regardless of how long I chose or choose in the future to be in the sex industry, I'm never going to look down on it. I'm never going to stop supporting workers. And I don't have any space in my life for people who do, you know, look down on workers as if they're like this lower caste of people and they're disgusting.
Yes. Let's talk about that, because we've had a little conversation on through emails, because I named my series Medicine Woman, and it had affected you, and you brought it up to me, and I've explained often, and when people come to my show, what the message I try to drive home is the language we use around anything defines how we treat that thing. And so if we're using language around sex work, I even think sex work is not enough. So I believe that sex is medicine, and I believe that intimacy is medicine, and sex workers are medicine people, that we provide a service of seeing people for who they are, or for allowing that fantasy to exist without more judgment. And that is what the world is craving right now, is to be seen and heard for who we really are. And for me, I try to say sex professional, but I can't say doctor yet. So, you know, the day I can say doctor, sex person, you know, I will. But for me to say a medicine person is the closest language I can get to elevating that, what we're actually doing. And I believe that if we, because, you know, people don't kill doctors. People don't beat doctors in the same way that sex workers are being treated. You know, like the title changes the way we treat, in my experience. You may have a lot to say to that. I would love to hear it.
So I do, but I want to make sure that you have finished your point.
I think I'm more interested in you right now.
Okay. So I do have a background. I don't consider myself an activist because I am not an organizer, and I feel like that's like a special title, again, for people who are doing that type of work. So I consider myself an advocate because I truthfully, like, I speak out and I talk about this topic and I raise awareness on it in the way that I can, and, you know, various topics. But so that's just the distinction that I personally make.
I appreciate that. I've learned something. Thank you. Yeah.
But so going into that, one of the topics that I talk a lot about is reproductive justice, and that overlaps with abortion advocacy. And so people don't kill doctors unless they're abortion care providers, and then it becomes a very charged, very negative, you're a baby killer sort of dialogue.
Correct. I do stand corrected there. Thank you. Yeah.
And I mean, but it is something that like you don't necessarily connect or think about, because it is, I'm sure it's a little bit different in Canada just because of like the nature of the left and right kind of wings there. Like they're still pretty liberal leaning, I feel, in comparison to the US.
We're very polite about our oppressions. We're just polite. Yeah. Our gun culture is very different. So our killing culture is different. I'll just say. And abortion is legal and free to any person that needs to access it. That gets challenged often, but it's in our constitution, let's say.
Fair enough.
So go on.
And so, yes, coming into the whole dialogue that we had, about medicine women as your title, I love the title. And I feel like that got lost in, the conversation that I was having, but just the optics of you being, and I kept like saying like, I think white passing, because I was like, you could be Native. I have no idea. But in general, just from seeing the other interviews that I looked up on your page, and what I could find out about you, was like, you appear to be white, and it feels disingenuous when I have Native friends. I myself have Native family members, and just other people who are Indigenous in my life that, if I were to promote the series, I'm like, I want to be able to tell them like, this is not like me pandering or like, trying to, I don't know, in some case, like overstep the boundary of like talking to this person who shouldn't be using this terminology. Because I kind of believe, along the same lines that like sex is medicine, intimacy is medicine. And so everything that you're saying, I'm like, it makes sense. And I am in full agreement. I think it's just like important to acknowledge. And that's kind of all I wanted to be sure about. I'm like, I just want to be sure that you are not like this person who doesn't understand like what it means to utilize this language and like co-opt this idea. Because I'm like, I'm sure people are going to challenge you on it the bigger your series gets.
Well, let's hope it gets big so that we can have these conversations more. And you really, I was so grateful that you had spoken up about it, because first of all, I needed to learn how to respond. That's a whole thing. And I did actually today. I launched the interview with my mentor, my elder. She's who is a medicine woman in her own right, and she's Indigenous. And I called her, and a little story. I sent her part of the interview, and I said, oh, like, we're gonna put the Medicine Women series up, and she said, can I call you? And I thought, oh, my first instinct as someone who's had trauma was like, I've done something very wrong. And she called me just to like get some information about a social, like how to post online or something like that. And I said, I thought you were calling to give me trouble, even though we'd already had the conversation. And she knows what the title is, like she's super supportive. And so I explained to her the conversation that we had. And she said that, I can't quote her exactly, but the gist of it was that there are some truths that are human that have been buried because of just our history, just the way things have kind of formed. And we can reveal those truths again but they are going to cause rifts. And she said, it just depends on what fire you want to tend to. She said, if she said, I stand by you 100%. I know what you're doing, and I believe in it. And she said, and as a pioneer, bringing back certain ancestral truths, like, people don't like to use the word shaman. It comes with a lot of weirdness to it. But there are shamanistic qualities in people. She said, if you're going to go there, you may or may not have to continue to explain yourself. That might be a fire you need to tend to. And so I took that to heart. I took everything that you said to heart. And if we can figure something out, I'm super down to, I don't know, like, nothing is written in stone for me ever. I'm evolving as we go, but I really loved the conversation, and I really wanted to talk about it in this platform, because I think it's good for people to see that you can have the conversation, and it doesn't have to be full of tension, and it can be loving. And, I have no problem changing course if it's going to help, if it's going to continue the message that I really want to pump out. So
Right.
I wanted to thank you for that.
Of course. Yeah. And I felt bad because, as someone who has been an editor and is used to working with editors, I was like, maybe this is also coming across as like, being a further co-optation, because I'm like, I don't want you to feel like you have to change the title because of, like, on the one hand, I agree with your elder, like, if it causes a rift, that means it's also getting someone's attention, and it furthers the depth of the dialogue. So, we don't want to do things that are treading lightly. We want to do things that are furthering and progressing a conversation.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And there's always that saying that everything isn't for everybody. So.
And I do have Indigenous family. I do work at, I told you all of this. My day job is in Canada, we call it reconciliation. And I do help to facilitate courageous conversations just like this between Indigenous and non-Indigenous folk in Canada. So it was good practice every single time.
Right.
Trying to see ourselves in each other, I think, is a really valuable thing, which is why I wanted to have these conversations with such powerful medicine women. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I really do appreciate you thinking of me for this project, because I think it's wonderful, and I will probably suggest some other people that you can talk to, but we'll get into that.
Okay, let's keep going. I have some more questions. I don't know how much time you have.
Oh, you're fine. You're good.
Okay. Okay. So I've got all these like these funny notepads like you. Okay.
I love Post-its. I would not be able to live my life if it weren't for Post-its.
Okay. Since we're still talking about sex work in particular, I want to know what your vision is for sex workers in particular, but the industry in general. Do you have a vision?
Oh, that's such a big part of the conversation that I've been having lately.
Yeah.
So there have been numerous stripper strikes taking place around the country.
Yeah.
And so my vision has always included, at least for strip clubs, because I fully intend to own my own strip club. The vision has to be more community centric.
Right.
So we have these workers who are coming in who are being exploited, just off of the strength that they pay to work in an environment that they are not guaranteed to see that return on their investment. Yeah. The staff can be hostile, the bartenders and other clients can be hostile, managers can be hostile, have been hostile, even the people who are there for security and to play the music, the DJs, have been hostile to the workers in some of the clubs that I've experienced. And so seeing all of that, it's one, taking the time to vet the people that we have working alongside these already extremely marginalized people, who some have more experience than others as far as like, what it would take to unionize or not, but actively just organizing and making sure that everybody's being treated fairly. I think it's absurd that we don't have clubs that actually offer like shift meals or provide, daycare, childcare, or night care, if that's the case.
Wouldn't the game?
And so these are all things that I'm like, even though these particular instances don't like affect me, like I don't have a child, I'm not a parent, have gone through extreme lengths not to be. And, but understanding that people are parents and they still do come to work every day, or every night, and need to make sure that their children are safe and protected. And it would be so wonderful to have, that infrastructure as part of clubs. I don't see anything wrong with it. Now I know that that's kind of a provocative statement, because a lot of people might not want to bring their children to their club or the place that they work. But, if you have someone or a couple of people who are, registered and able to take care of children, and they check out as far as like background checks and things like that, like, why not? And especially if it's also free, or if it's a small percentage of your income is taken to like go towards that, why wouldn't you? Because your kid would then immediately be available. Like, you could go to the room or the part of the club where all the kids are and check in and see how they're doing throughout the shift. So,
oh my God, there's so much I could say about that. Okay, but we're talking about this vision. So yes, I definitely, I'm with you 100%. Like the more we can make environment, set and setting is so important for success. So like if we can create environments that help the girls make more safe, clubs are making more, like it just benefits everyone. It also kind of, the strong boundaries create expectations of clients, which I think is a really smart thing too. It doesn't matter on what your socioeconomic landscape looks like. You can still be a nice, kind, respectful person.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just like eliminating the stigma that comes with being a stripper. I know there are so many extremely harmful, all sex workers, but since we're talking about strippers currently, just so many harmful stereotypes that are like, perpetuated, that just don't even make any sense in this context of our society. Because like many strippers that I know have, gone to college, gotten degrees, and that doesn't make them more legitimate and viable as people who should be respected just because of their own educational background. Like, obviously they deserve to be respected regardless. But to then hear like, guys come into clubs and say like, oh, you all must be so stupid and you're so young and like naive to think that like this is a job that you can have for any length of time, and like, just like to talk down to us, or even be told like you're too smart to be here. That's been one that I've gotten numerous times, and I'm like, oh, do I have the spoons to deal with this in the way that I can today, right now?
Yeah.
But even
and to keep
yeah.
Yeah.
Outside of that, the visions that I have for like the porn industry, I'm a part of another collective that is actively seeking to dismantle racism in porn.
Wow.
And
wow. Like the frontier, it feels like the Wild West.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
and so it's all very like inspiring and gratifying, and like we just had someone come in who was like a professor, you know, a doctorate level scholar, who is doing an archive on Black sex workers and the history of Black sex workers in the US. And it's just like, oh my gosh, like so incredible to see that this is like the direction that people, you know, are trying to take it.
Yeah.
I actually had a friend in college who did her, you know, her senior thesis on the history of like Black sex workers. And it's just like, she did it through the lens of, you know, already being like a queer Black person, but it's just like, this is where this is supposed to be. And I feel like more academics are taking part in this conversation, and it really helps to shift the narrative, because now you have not only the representation for people who have worked in the industry, but now you have like the backup of people who can take all of this data and all of these stories and actually make it, you know, meaningful and impactful to civilians. So people who have never been in the industry.
Yeah, that, and like the autoethnographies of all of us who are sharing our humanity, you know, like you do a lot of humanizing. I call it rehumanizing workers. That's what my show, The Parlor Project, does. It rehumanizes these archetypes that we've, like, you know, I call them archetypos. These flattened ideas of what these artists are there for. But yeah, I think that I mean, we're getting shut down all the time, of course, but the fact that people are not scared in the same way to live out loud, to me, is you can't stop that momentum. And what
Absolutely.
comes up next, you know, well, we all know that these platforms are built on our backs, but
Yeah.
I have hope.
Part of,
I have hope. I have faith. I really do. Yeah.
I think that, so another big part of my vision for the sex industry is that there's more equity. So we have, you know, this imbalance of power between sex workers who are more of the back end. So people who create these websites and like are producers in that way, or people who own clubs. All of these people, you know, have this power and this money and this status, and they, like, their identities are not on the front lines in the same way that mine or yours is.
Yes.
And, you know, so all of their decision making is based off of their own experiences. They're not talking to the workers themselves. And so I don't believe that they are going to be the people to give us more, you know, of a space and an understanding to like change things from the inside. We're going to have to like completely create our own platforms and our own clubs and our own, you know, resources and things to change this industry.
Yeah.
And all of that is coming across as like this giant wave, this momentum, and people are totally on board to do it, but we still need the financial backing. And so for the time being, you know, the sites and the opportunities that we have available are just going to have to be utilized for what they are, as like their financial resources right now. And then we're going to have to start pouring all of that money and all of the power that we slowly get, you know, into this larger pot that can create those changes.
Yeah. And I mean, like, not to mention Sosta Festa and the Earn It Act, which are not Canadian laws.
Yeah.
Affect us in profound ways. You know, just having, you know, feel like what a dumb wall to have to bang your head against. You know, these I mean, I don't know the subtle nuances of them, but anytime censorship comes in the name of protecting something, I get a little bit concerned. Like free speech, to me, I think it's a slippery slope, censorship in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, it can be twisted. It just depends on who's deciding what's okay and not okay to say. So it's we've got to learn how to respond to things that we don't like to hear more than cut out things we don't want to hear. Like
Right.
like the more the merrier. That's how I feel. Like the more religions in schools, the better. You know, the more things that are happening, the better. Let's teach us how to filter out what we really need and through our own values, as opposed to, you know, limit our access to things that may or may not be true. You know, how's it going over there with that? Anyway, I know like the workers I know through online have just been shouting so loud, like, help stop this thing. And then it passed, the recent one, the Earn It Act.
Yes.
What's the like what's happening now to, I don't know how the system works necessarily. Like, can you fight back and try to, what is it called?
So I am not as well read on this particular act. I know that it passed in I want to say the Senate. I don't know if that means it still has to go through Congress or like the House or whatever, or vice versa. So usually a bill has to get approved twice. And for it to have gone through this first time, that is deeply concerning. But I think that there will have to be like a second round before it actually becomes a set of laws.
Okay.
To
know.
Don't quote me on that because I am not certain.
Yeah.
But
I mean, let this be a call to action right now to anyone who's watching to look up Earn It Act and look up who to talk to about getting rid of it, because it is forcing workers offline onto the street to die.
yes. So to define it for people who are also not familiar with it, the Earn It Act is a piece of legislation that has been brought up that is supposed to eliminate like end-to-end encryption on websites so that there's no privacy. So the government would be able to, you know, thoroughly look through all of our emails, all of our text messages, all of our archives of messages on any platform at any given time.
Yeah.
And this is all supposed to be, like you're saying, in the vein of protecting, you know, again, children who they use that fucking flimsy excuse, you know, to pass SESTA and FOSTA in the first place. Like, it's supposed to be, you know, protecting children
from sex, which I think is a whole other conversation about the difference between sex work and sex trafficking. But
yes,
yeah. So this attempt to protect to be able to look into your private life with this grand gesture of protecting the children from sex trafficking.
Right.
What it means is that your rights are, your human right to privacy is no longer protected.
Not in a digital sphere.
Not in a digital sphere.
And so, yeah, it's not only pushing sex workers offline, because now, you know, it's even more dangerous for us to be able to try to, you know, for full service workers who are operating online, screen clients, to even have those records, like, very, very bad. And even for websites like Safe Office, or other platforms used for like verification in that way, it's like they will now have access to something like that. So even a platform that is supposed to be completely privatized, you know, if they want to be able to operate, they're going to have to bend to that. And it's incredibly frustrating. I know for a fact that like a lot of people right now, like, you know, as far as like the strip club is concerned, are not as impacted, but are still like trying to rally that solidarity, you know, with full service workers.
Because Because it's illegal everywhere in the States to sell sex. Is that correct?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
that's like, it's okay.
Yes. So even in the case of strip clubs in particular, so the issue is that you cannot allow someone to have an orgasm, because even stripping, you can, if you're giving a lap dance and someone becomes aroused and they end up having an orgasm, you can go to jail for that.
Wow. So if this dude is like super shamed by not having control over himself, he can get you in a lot of trouble. Would he get himself into trouble? I'm saying he. Is it illegal to buy?
And so in that case, in that particular instance, I don't believe that he would be in trouble in the club setting. If this were taking place outside of it, different story. But I don't think that he'd be facing. So also, like, there's different tiers of how it would work. I know for full service workers who are arrested if they're on the street, or just in general, if you're arrested for solicitation, that's what they consider it. It's a misdemeanor here in my state for the first time you're arrested. It becomes a felony on the third time you're arrested.
Wow.
So yeah, because you would already have, and that's if you get convicted the first time around and it stays on your record. But if you're obviously found again, get convicted, and goes through the whole system again. So it has to happen at least 3 times unless they catch you in the middle of the act. So if you're already, you've negotiated everything and like exchanging money and they catch you exchanging the money.
Yeah, it's like the government hates women. That's how I see it.
They do. They absolutely do. Like, our government is made up, seriously, of the most misogynistic, queer-phobic, xenophobic, just conservative garbage that they could find. And it's so depraved how much of an entitlement they have over the bodies of other people.
Yeah. And war is waged over women's bodies. I believe that. I say women very generally, femme identified, but that is how, I feel like wars are won and lost. In Canada, it is illegal to purchase sex, but it is not illegal to sell your own sexual services. So there's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, I'm like, that's an interesting disconnect.
No, yeah, and it still creates shame for both parties. Like there's all of this stuff that just is so sad to me. It's not. I mean, I actually feel like, I don't know what you think about this, but if we were given the freedom to have entrepreneurial ownership over our bodies fully, it would topple the economic infrastructure as it is. It would. I believe that the way that money is being made would be very, very different, and the people
Absolutely
would be very different. And
Absolutely.
I think so much fear in the I don't want to say dismantle, like it's like it would disrupt capitalism, I think.
Surely.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the fear and so much of the push behind, criminalizing sex work.
Yeah.
Because it is historically a body of work where women make a shit ton of money. And that is every like misogynist's worst nightmare, to have a woman who is not only mentally and emotionally powerful,
Mm-hmm.
but financially powerful. And because then it becomes political power, because that's how our society operates.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so having like sex workers create unions and having those actually like do the job of trying to get better labor rights and just like representation in the government at any level, no, that would be huge.
Yeah. Baby steps. Baby steps.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. I want to know about your creative process, because
Okay.
you're a brilliant artist. Your modeling has a lot of emotion in it. You have a, like we were saying before, like your genres. You're a shapeshifter, and I was watching you do a little tease with your wig and having a lot of fun like that, and then getting into more dom kink play. And like, what's your creative process? I'm really excited to hear like what sparks you, and how do you follow through on these visions? How do you collaborate?
So it really depends on what the body of work is that I shot in the most recent, past. So if I'm looking at the next round of videos that I'm going to shoot, I'll look at what the last week of things that I shot, how they performed and what needs to be shot to create further better performance. So it starts there, but then also gets into my own emotions and feel on the day that I'm going to start shooting. Because I'm trying to get into a very scheduled, week by week case where like I'm only shooting maybe 3 times a week, and then I'm editing for 2 more of those days, and then I still have like 2 days to run errands and then kind of reset. So yeah, it's like, and those 2 days could be, whether it's like Sunday and Wednesday or something like that. Like, it's not the traditional Saturday, Sunday is my weekend. And especially because if I'm shooting with my partner, I have to factor in when both of us are going to want to feel like performing on camera at the same time.
Yeah.
So, all of that. But if I'm feeling very, like, I guess kind of like an out of body, like I don't really want to perform femininity in that way, then those are when that's when I shoot dom content, because I feel like I don't feel like being, the pretty submissive. I feel very bitchy and kind of like I want to be more of my dominant self.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's kind of the switch on that. As far as like how the content's going to be shot, like where it's shot in my house.
Usually, is it usually your house?
Yeah, unless I'm traveling, which with the pandemic we can't do right now. So on occasion, I've traveled to the Pacific Northwest and like the South and West Coast and all that good jazz. Up to New York, I've shot a ton up there, and other places. But for the most part, I self-shoot, and that usually is here in my house. So it'll be this space. There's actually a pole right next to me. And so I'll shoot pole videos here. I typically, like, this layout is like new, so I've been trying to figure out like how I want to shoot it. And so a lot of like the toy content that I have has been shot in this area. But I have my own bedroom to use as well, and like have shot stuff there because it's a little bit more space. Like, this is literally a futon and it takes up like half the room that I'm in. And then with the pole next to it, it's just like there's a very limited amount of space that I'm shooting in, which makes for some interesting angles.
Yeah,
but
I find limitations are like helpful for creativity sometimes.
And for the most part, I mean, I take being a chameleon somewhat seriously, because I like to be able to keep people on their toes. I mean, my subscribers and fans at this point have seen so many variations of me that whatever I give them at the end of the day is like still considered a gift, and they're happy for it. Because it's just the quality. Like, I'm trying to make sure that it's the best that I can produce.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I try to switch it up where I'm using like different colored lighting and like backgrounds, props, like whatever, toys, and just making it like a different experience as much as I can.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's become challenging since we are limited to just one space to shoot in. But, you know, it is the mother of invention.
It's kind of like music where you've got like 12 notes and how much diverse sounds have we achieved with these 12 notes and time and space. And
right.
Yeah, I mean, sex is kind of the same. It's kind of like, it is what it is. Boobs are boobs, like things are what they are, but how we decide to pay attention to one thing and not pay attention to another thing, all of that stuff adds up and can create a real sense of excitement or familiarity or curiosity. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially because I have like a growing array of toys and things now too. Like,
do you have a little toy wall? Toy box? Where do you store your toys?
I'm managing it because I have so many now that like it is getting out of control. Like I need to come up with a more permanent solution. Seriously, like there was, I would have to move you. Do you want to take a trip really quickly? Because I can show you. So as it is right now, leaving the shoot room, coming into my bedroom, I have, let's see, can I? Yep. So there's this assortment of random dildos and things. And then I have a drawer of lubes and chargers and condoms and all kinds of stuff. Some of these are like butt plugs. These are glass dildos, actually.
Beautiful. You're very organized.
I try. It's the Virgo. I can't help it. Like,
oh, your birthday's coming up.
Yes. And there's like some kink stuff in here, so like rope and like a blindfold and handcuffs and stuff.
Yeah.
A little riding crop, strap on, you know, the usual. And so yeah, but I want to find something to do, like some kind of storage for this, because they're actually on a platform that's like a box that I was trying to fit all of my dildos in, and it didn't work out. So
that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And
yeah,
I don't know who's gonna see this, but I'm very happy. Very cool. Thank you. Okay, let's see here. I don't want to go too much longer because we can always talk again if you want.
Absolutely.
Is there anything left on your heart that you would like to say right now?
I just want to always have, I guess, like a dialogue where sex workers are able to share their own stories. I want people to stop talking for us. And this has come up only in light of being asked to participate in projects where the narrative would not necessarily be my own. Yeah. And so whatever I would be contributing to it would not necessarily fall in line with all of my values and my interests. So yeah, I think just making sure that we can keep allowing for conversations like this, and bringing more people into the fold.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I don't like being othered. I don't think anyone does. It really minimizes all humans when we do that. And so I really appreciate that you shared your toy box with me and everyone, and your heart, and a little bit about your story. There's so much more I would love to talk to you about and ask you for next time. It's been hours, so I'm going to wrap this up with just some deep gratitude And one last question that I've been asking everyone at the end, and it goes like this. If you were a flower today, what flower would you be and why? Today.
Probably a chrysanthemum.
Oh.
Yeah, because they're just layered and textured and gorgeous. Like, it's hard because I would either pick those or a sunflower. Because sunflowers have the ability to grow no matter what, and usually have a very toxic foundation. So,
well, I would add both of those to the bouquet today. Thank you.
yes.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate this conversation.